Hi everyone, and welcome to today's video. My name is Angel DeSantis. I am a religious trauma counselor and a yoga teacher, and if this is your first video with me, welcome. I grew up in a cult called the Children of God, and I make these videos every week surrounding the topic of religious trauma, just to kind of share all the things that I use that have helped me and some of my hypotheses and tools and tips that hopefully will help you where you are. And today I wanted to talk about trauma bonding and what it is like to have a trauma bond with God. So I'm going to break that all down, and that is what today's video is about. And if you've been here before and you enjoy this topic, remember to hit like and subscribe. It does help and I appreciate it. So thank you, thank you. And if you have never heard of trauma bonding, it's Stockholm Syndrome, and I'm going to look down. I have my computer. I'm going to read a couple of things. But right off the bat, I want to say that I am not accusing God in any of this. And that is, I think, an important distinction to make. A lot of times, God's authority, in religious trauma specifically, gets completely misused, and you end up having a really complicated relationship with, quote, God, but none of that is God's fault. It's the fault of the people who use God's authority against you. So I just want to make that distinction. I'm not accusing God of anything. God is whatever God is to you, or the universe, whatever it is. But I want to talk about the complications of coming out from religious trauma, but still feeling that you cannot or should not betray God. And I've been working a lot with my clients on this, with a few of them. So I'm just going to offer out the information and tools that I gave them as well. So I'm going to start with Stockholm Syndrome because trauma bonding is related to Stockholm Syndrome. And this is from an article on Prep Scholar, and it says, what causes Stockholm Syndrome? And it says, Stockholm Syndrome occurs in people who have usually been kidnapped or taken hostage and held against their will. Additionally, some psychologists believe that Stockholm Syndrome is more likely in situations where captors do not physically abuse their hostages. Instead, captors rely on the threat of violence instead, which can be aimed towards the victims. Additionally, the lack of violence becomes a sign of kindness, or in other words, because a captor could but doesn't act on their threats, victims begin to see that as a sign that their captors care about them. And there's actually a really famous case of where Stockholm Syndrome comes from, which you can look up. But I want to break that down in relation to how God can be used against you. And if you've been through religious trauma of any sort, you probably recognize what I just encapsulated, where you start to feel a trauma bond towards God because you think, well, God is all powerful, and so he can hurt me. And especially when it comes to the relationship with you and religion, there's a lot of things that religion tells you not to do. So it can be anything. It can be don't wear pants. It can be don't listen to music. And if you ever do, quote, break the law by wearing pants, or for me it was chewing gum or wearing sunglasses, then you think that, well, God could punish me because I wasn't supposed to wear pants, and I did. And you think, well, God has the authority to punish me. And then when God, quote, doesn't punish you, then you feel that that is a kindness from God, and then that makes you feel indebted to God because he didn't punish you or she didn't punish you for wearing pants. And if you track back far enough, you see that the issue is not at all whether or not you're wearing pants. The issue is that the authority of, quote, an all-powerful and all-being God is being weaponized against you for the audacity that you had to wear pants. And that should never have been in existence. That situation never should have been in existence. But what ends up happening inside of you is that you start to feel this trauma bond with God, where you feel like it's a blessing that God is not harming you. So I am going to continue a little bit more. It says cases of Stockholm Syndrome can show evidence of emotional manipulation or abuse. In these instances, the captors use emotional tactics to convince the victims to sympathize with them and comply with their demand. So, in this particular case, in relationship to religious trauma, it is usually maybe a pastor or somebody who is higher up than you on the, I don't know, closeness to God authority, that is the one who is using God to emotionally manipulate you. And even after in this case, the captor is no longer there, the victims feel sympathetic towards the cause. So even after you are no longer in that religious structure, you still feel sympathetic or indebted towards God. So it says, the environment necessary to create a trauma bond involves intensity, complexity, inconsistency, and a promise. Victims stay because they are holding on to that elusive promise or hope. There is always manipulation involved. Victims are prey to the manipulation because they are willing to tolerate almost anything for the payoff, which is that elusive promise and ever-present hope for fulfillment of some deeply personal need within the victim. So there's a lot. We'll unpack it. So again, the environment necessary to create a trauma bond involves intensity, complexity, inconsistency, and a promise. And for me, growing up the way I did in the cult, it was super intense environment because the end of the world was always coming. It was super complex. They would remove children from their families, and they had this whole hierarchical system that was very confusing. They were incredibly inconsistent because the rules were a suggestion and you had to follow them unless you got permission not to. So it was really confusing and inconsistent. And then there's that promise. And usually when it comes to religious trauma, the promise is the afterlife. And it has nothing to do with the here and now. It has to do with when this is all over, then you get this. And there's this promise of eternal salvation or heaven. And victims stay because they are holding on to that elusive promise or hope. And for me, I remember having this conversation with my therapist where he asked, what were you promised? And I told him, well, I held on to God for so long, even after I left the cult. I held on to a kind of patriarchal, traditional God is a man, and then Jesus is a man, and then the Holy Spirit. So I held on to that for a really long time, which I no longer have, but I held on to it. And he said, well, why? What were you promised? And I said, well, I was promised unconditional love. And my therapist was like, well, did you ever get it? And I was like, oh, no, actually, yeah, no, I never got it. And he was like, was the love that you were promised, that unconditional love, actually, did it come with a list of conditions? And I was like, yes, actually. So when I look at it now, I see how inconsistent it is and how it makes no sense. But when I was in it, because I wanted that promise, because I wanted that unconditional love, I didn't see the complete irrationality behind the fact that unconditional love is hidden behind a barrier of conditions that you will never achieve. But the hope is that you'll be worthy of unconditional love. And that is why I would stay and would try and dull myself down and try and obey and try and make myself small and try and hit the list of conditions that I had to hit in order to leap the barrier to get to the thing that I was promised, which was I was hoping for, was unconditional love. So, and it says again, the victims are prey to manipulation because they are willing to tolerate almost anything for the payoff, which is the elusive promise and ever-present hope for fulfillment or some deeply personal need held within the victim. So if you are in that space where it's kind of confusing for you and you're coming out of religious trauma, or you're realizing, oh, I still have this, but you still have a complicated relationship with God, it might be worth it to think about, do I have a trauma bond with God? And again, it's important to know that even if you realize you don't have a good relationship with God right now, at no point does that mean you need to lose God. It means you need to lose the relationship you have with him or her and cultivate another one. So you can always maintain God in your life. And I think that is a really big barrier for people doing the work, is they don't want to lose the connection to God, and you don't have to. And that's really important, because God is whatever you think God is. God can mean whatever he means to you, and God can be something really beautiful. And I know for a lot of people who are even in religion, God is a beautiful thing, and that's wonderful, and that is what God is supposed to be. But I'm talking specifically to the people who feel that God's authority was used against them. but somehow you still feel indebted to God. And that's a really confusing place to be. And that's why it's important to know what trauma bonding is or what Stockholm Syndrome is, and being able to relate it to the relationship that you have, and just asking yourself the questions of like, does this bond sound kind of like the relationship that I have to God? And if so, then it's important to dissolve that one and grow a new one, which you are always, your relationship with God is your relationship with God. And you're always welcome to do that. Okay, so now we are going to jump to a different article which talks about how to break or recover from a trauma bond. And this is from Psychology Today. And it says, breaking free. Professional help is always highly recommended. Not only is a professional a safe person to talk to, but they can also help the individual develop effective strategies, such as, number one, separation. Separating from the abusive relationship is key. This means physical and emotional separation, although the physical side of the separation is much easier. And when it comes to God, I think the physical side of separating from God is fairly easy. Or for me, leaving the cult physically, that was easy. But the emotional part for me was much, much harder. Having to separate from God feels like a loss, but it feels like a loss of your entire world, the structure of your entire world. So that was a much more devastating loss for me. Secondly, so number one is separation. Number two is acknowledging one's own choice. Exploring the relationship you have through coaching or therapy to see gaslighting or emotional abuse, criticism, control, and the addictive aspects of the relationship is hard work, but it also provides the opportunity for you to recognize, acknowledge, and affirm your own positive choices to get away and avoid being held as an emotional captive in the relationship. We'll unpack. So, acknowledging your ability for choice. It is difficult sometimes to understand what your part of the abusive relationship that you might have with God is, because when it comes to that, you feel like the victim. And if God was weaponized against you, you are the victim. But it's important, again, to separate out what God is and who used God against you, because those are two different things. Who God is and how he was weaponized against you, two different things. So it is really deeply emotional work to have to separate out all of that stuff, because it's all stuck together, and having to ply it out like one step at a time can be really complicated. And that's why it's helpful to talk to somebody who has either been through it or studied a lot and understands the complexities behind it. But acknowledging your power for choice. So in your relationship with God, there is still choice. And if you're like, well, no, why did God give you the opportunity for choice if you were not supposed to have it? I think choice is a wonderful thing. It's what gives you free will, and you should always have the ability to make choices, especially when it comes to your relationship with God. Because if your relationship with God is not a choice, then it's not a relationship. If you're in any sort of relationship because you don't have a choice, that's a horrible relationship, and there is an abuser and a victim if there's no choice made. Even if the abuser doesn't mean to be an abuser, if there's no choice made in the relationship, it skews the relationship right off the bat. So I think when it comes to God, you should acknowledge that you play a part in your relationship with God, and your relationship with God is your choice. You always have the power to make choices, and that includes this one as well. Even though it can feel overwhelming and it can feel like a really skewed power dynamic, it might feel skewed because of who you were taught God is. And if you grew up in an abusive religion, who you were taught God is incorrect. And you always have the choice to learn more and make your own decisions. Finally, developing a support network. Just as the codependent is working to get away and become emotionally free from trauma bonding, the narcissist is working to bring the codependent back under their control. It's important to develop a network of professionals, friends, and trusted family members who understand their goals and are actively, positively, and compassionately there to support them in their journey forward. So, this speaks about trauma bonding as a codependent and a narcissist, which is a whole other thing. But in this case, I'm using it to relate to somebody who's been through religious trauma and who they were taught God is. And the person who taught you that, or the culture that taught you that God is scary and abusive, will always try and bring you back under their control. Because a lot of times with abusive religions, they're using the religion to control you. They have no interest in your afterlife. They will say they do because that's the promise that they're dangling. And what they really want is to be able to control your actions. So you might hear people tell you out of, quote, concern that you need to come back to the fold, or you need to act a certain way for God because God loves you so much. And again, it's emotional manipulation and emotional abuse using, quote, God's will as the excuse. So it's important to develop a support network of, again, trusted family members, health professionals, and friends who understand your goals and are actively trying to support you in your journey forward. So if you're here and you're watching this video, you're already on a journey forward. And it's really important to acknowledge that you've already made the choice to take your journey forward, to move away from religious trauma and into a healthier mental state, which is really important. And you deserve to congratulate yourself for that. But again, wrapping it up, breaking free from a trauma bond. Number one is separation. And in the case of religious trauma, it would be mostly emotional separation, but also physical. Secondly, acknowledging your power for choice. You have a choice in your relationship with God. Thirdly, developing a support network. So those are the three things to help you get away from trauma bonds. And when it comes to something as all-encompassing as God, it can get really convoluted and really confusing. And it's important to know that first, something is confusing, and then it's painful, and then it's harmful. And that's generally the scale that something follows. So if you are just confused right now, that's a good sign. That means you're at the top of the scale. So first a thing is confusing, and then it's painful, and then it's harmful. And if you've already hit confusing, that means you've come out from something being harmful to something being painful, and now you're just confused. And that's good. That means you're on the end of the scale that is either the starting point for the slide down, or as you're climbing up, that's kind of the last one before you start to get kind of better information and to a better mental state. So if you're just confused right now, that's a good thing because you can always get more knowledge to help you sort out your confusion. So I'm going to end on that note. So if any of this sounds familiar, or if you have any sort of, I'm going to let the traffic go by. If you have any sort of elements or videos or articles that you want to drop below, please do. I know that the people who watch these videos, we're all curious. We're all interested. I'm interested. If you have any links or anything like that, drop them below or ask questions, ask comments. I love talking about this stuff. I think it's really important. And remember, if you are just confused, that's okay. Get some information to get you to a healthier mental state. And remember that thoughts just need to clear two bars. They have to be true and they have to be useful. So as you are looking for more information, especially if you are confused, have it clear those two bars. It has to be true information and it has to be useful. And you can kind of carry yourself out of whatever confusion it is that you're in. So I hope that this was helpful. As always, thank you so much for being here. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.